London was gray that morning, a gray that clung to the bones, to the insides of your thoughts. Ethan Caldwell stood by the cracked window of his flat, watching the drizzle trace crooked lines down the glass, blurring the city into watercolor. The radiator hissed beside him, failing to cut through the damp. He hadn't paid the heating bill in 2 months. There was a time not long ago when his mornings had begun with sunlight over the Thames, with coffee brewed in offices of glass and chrome. But that life, the life of Caldwell, senior data engineer, Orion Systems UK, had vanished the moment he opened his mouth. He still remembered the meeting room, the cold air, the silence, the faces of men who no longer looked at him as a colleague but as an infection. He remembered the folder in his trembling hands, the reports, the data, the proof that Orion had been harvesting more than it claimed, not just data but minds, emotion mapping, neural inference, people's private patterns reduced to lines of code. And then the press release, the lawsuit, the firing, the long, slow spiral down. Now he lived off temp jobs and borrowed time. And he was tired. That was when he saw the ad. Night receptionist, rural in Yorkshire. Experience preferred, immediate start, £60 hour. Must be willing to work alone. Lodging provided. The number was written in neat, old-fashioned ink at the bottom, not printed but written, as if the ad had been copied by hand before being pinned to the notice board of the job center. Ethan almost ignored it, but desperation is a persuasive force. Within the hour he'd called. Within 2 days, a letter arrived. Mr. Caldwell, your application has been accepted. Please report to the Blackthorn Inn, Crossfield Moor, Yorkshire. Your duties begin at midnight Monday. Lodging is provided on site. Further instructions will be given upon arrival. V. Grange, proprietor. He'd never heard of Crossfield Moor. He couldn't find the inn on Google Maps. And yet by Monday morning, he was driving north. The road wound through miles of empty countryside, the land dissolving into a misty expanse of gray fields and stone walls. His car, an old Honda that smelled faintly of dog fur and stale coffee, shuddered as it climbed a narrow lane lined with blackthorn bushes, their spines slick with rain. Luna, his shepherd mix, sat in the back seat, head on her paws, eyes bright with the weary trust of a creature who didn't care where they were going, as long as she wasn't left behind. Almost there, Ethan said, though the GPS had long since given up. New start, huh? The only answer was the soft hum of tires on wet gravel. It was just after dusk when he first saw it, the Blackthorn Inn. It rose from the fog like something misplaced from time. 3 stories of dark stone, its windows aglow with weak amber light. A wrought iron sign hung above the entrance, creaking in the wind. Blackthorn Inn, EST, 1823. The building looked both solid and frail at once, the way old places do when they've stood too long without being truly alive. A man waited under the porch light. Tall, thin, coat buttoned to the throat. His posture was erect, military almost, though the years had worn his frame to angles. Mr. Caldwell, he said, voice low, precise. Yes, Ethan Caldwell. Victor Grange, the man extended a gloved hand. I run the place. The handshake was brief, cool. Grange's eyes were a pale gray, nearly colorless. He studied Ethan the way one studies a photograph, noting details, measuring distance. Long drive. About 5 hours. You'll find the nights quieter here than in London. A pause. Quieter but not always easy. He gestured for Ethan to follow him inside. The lobby was a relic from another century. A faded rug stretched toward a carved oak desk, and a brass bell sat in the center. The air smelled faintly of polish and old smoke. To the right, a sitting room with a fireplace, unlit but laid with logs. To the left, a corridor that disappeared into shadow. Behind the counter stood an antique register book, its pages yellowed and curling at the edges. Only a few names filled the last page, written in different inks, none recent. Grange took a small folder from under the desk and slid it toward Ethan. "These are your instructions. You'll begin tonight." Ethan opened it. Inside was a list, typed on aged paper, creased as if it had been folded and refolded many times. Rules for night reception, Blackthorn Inn. Do not enter the basement after midnight. Do not answer the telephone after 2:00 a.m. If anyone asks for room 13, inform them there is no such room. Cover all mirrors before dawn. Keep the main doors locked from midnight until 6:00 a.m. Never, under any circumstance, leave the reception desk unattended between 1:00 and 4:00 a.m. Ethan frowned. Is this a joke? Grange's face remained unreadable. I assure you it is. Some of these are strange. Every place has its history, Grange said simply. Blackthorn has more than most. These rules are not for discussion, only for observance. The old man's tone left no room for argument. He handed Ethan a brass key. Room 5, your quarters. The dog may stay, provided she doesn't wander. Luna wagged her tail once, sensing her mention. Midnight sharp, Grange continued. The day staff leave by 11. You'll find the desk stocked with the logbook and spare keys. Should you hear anything unusual, you follow the rules. Understand? Ethan nodded, uneasy. Understood. Good, then welcome to the Blackthorn Inn, Mr. Caldwell. May your nights be quiet. His room was simple but clean. A narrow bed, a writing desk, and a single window that overlooked the courtyard. The wallpaper was a dull green, peeling slightly near the ceiling. When he turned off the lamp, the silence was immense, the kind of silence that hums in your skull, where you start to hear your own pulse. He lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to Luna's soft breathing at his feet. He should have felt relief. He had a job, a room, a chance to start over. But something about the inn unsettled him. The way the corridors seemed too long, the way every sound seemed to echo just a little too late. He dreamed that night of water dripping in darkness, and a woman's voice whispering behind a wall. When he woke, the clock read 11:59 p.m. The first night. Ethan dressed quickly, pulling on his jacket. Luna lifted her head, whining softly as he closed the door behind him. The corridor was dim, lit only by a single bulb at each end. His footsteps seemed loud on the wooden floorboards as he descended the stairs to the lobby. Grange was there, adjusting his coat, hat already on. All quiet? Ethan asked. As quiet as it ever is, Grange replied. The guests have retired. I'll be gone until morning. You'll find the logs from previous nights in the drawer. He paused, gaze sharp. Remember the rules. And then he was gone. Ethan stood alone behind the desk. The grandfather clock by the wall struck 12, each chime resonating through the lobby like a pulse. Midnight. He checked the register, 3 guests staying. A couple in room 7, a traveling salesman in room 9, and 1 unmarked key missing from the board labeled staff. Probably Grange. The minutes crawled. He made tea. He wrote in the logbook. He read an old paperback he'd brought. By 1:30, the only sound was the faint tick of the clock and the occasional creak of settling wood. Then a sound. A dull thump from below. He froze. Another thump, then silence. He glanced at the door behind the counter marked basement, a heavy, old door with iron hinges, padlocked shut. His hand instinctively reached for the keyring before he caught himself. Rule 1. Do not enter the basement after midnight. He exhaled slowly, forcing a small laugh. Old pipes, or a furnace, or maybe rats. It was an old building, things moved. The phone rang. A jolt of ice shot through him. The clock read 2:03 a.m. Rule 2. Do not answer the telephone after 2:00 a.m. He stared at the receiver as it rang, once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed in the emptiness, shrill, insistent. His rational mind whispered, it might be an emergency. What if something happened to one of the guests? His gut said, don't. On the 7th ring, it stopped. Ethan waited, every muscle tight. The silence returned, heavier than before. He almost didn't notice when Luna began to growl, a low, steady rumble from upstairs. He turned, looking toward the stairwell. Her claws clicked softly against the floorboards above, packing. "What is it, girl?" he whispered, but his voice seemed to vanish into the air. Then a knock at the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. He turned toward the glass front door. Beyond it, the night pressed close, a solid wall of fog. A figure stood just beyond the porch light, tall, still, face obscured by shadow. Ethan hesitated, remembering Rule 5. Keep the main doors locked from midnight until 6:00 a.m. The figure didn't move. Then from the darkness, a man's voice, calm, cultured, almost polite. "Good evening. I believe I have a reservation." "I'm sorry," Ethan called, voice unsteady. "We're closed for the night. You'll have to come back in the morning." A pause, then, "I believe you'll find me listed under room 13. Ethan's breath caught. "There is no room 13, he said, forcing the words. "You must have the wrong place." The figure tilted its head slightly as though studying him. Then, without another word, it turned and walked away, disappearing into the fog, footsteps silent on the gravel. Ethan stood frozen for a long time, hand gripping the counter until his knuckles went white. When he finally dared to move, he glanced at the key rack behind him. The brass tag marked 13, which hadn't been there before, now hung from a single hook. By dawn, Ethan's nerves were frayed raw. He didn't remember making it back to his room, only that the world outside had turned pale gray, and that Luna refused to leave his side. At breakfast, he confronted Grange. "There was someone outside last night," Ethan said. "He asked for room 13, and he hesitated. There's a key. On the rack, it wasn't there before." Grange looked at him for a long time, expression unreadable. Then quietly, "Did you give him the room?" "No." "Good," Grange said simply. "Then you did well." "That's it, you're not going to explain." "Mr. Caldwell," the older man interrupted, "explanations are rarely comforting in places like this. You followed the rules. Continue to do so. Everything else will make itself clear in time." He turned, as if the conversation were already over. "Rest while you can. Tonight will be different." That night, Ethan sat at the desk again. The rules lay beside him, their edges now faintly stained, perhaps from the damp, perhaps from something older. He found himself tracing the words with his finger, wondering what kind of place required such warnings. Above him, the inn settled into silence once more. And somewhere in that silence, faint, almost imagined, came the sound of breathing from behind the basement door. The morning after his first shift, Ethan felt like he hadn't slept at all. The gray light that seeped through the curtains didn't feel like daylight. It felt like the dim reflection of some other world, filtered through frost. His coffee tasted metallic. Luna refused to go near the lobby stairs. She sat by the window, watching the courtyard, tail stiff, body alert. Her ears twitched once, twice, then stilled. "What is it, girl?" he asked softly. But she only whined, a low, worried sound, and turned away from the glass. He told himself the night before was exhaustion, imagination, the echo chamber of a quiet building and an overtired mind. But the key for room 13 still hung from the rack downstairs. He had checked that morning before breakfast. It gleamed faintly in the lobby's half-light, its brass tag worn smooth with age. Grange had said nothing more about it. Just the same measured tone, "Follow the rules." That evening, Ethan sat on the narrow bed, the rule sheet unfolded beside him. He read it again, as if the paper itself might explain something the words did not. 1. Do not enter the basement after midnight. 2. Do not answer the telephone after 2:00 a.m. 3. If anyone asks for room 13, inform them there is no such room. 4. Cover all mirrors before dawn. 5. Keep the main doors locked from midnight until 6:00 a.m. 6. Never, under any circumstance, leave the reception desk unattended between 1:00 and 4:00 a.m. He didn't know which unsettled him more, the rules themselves, or the feeling that they had been written for him long before he arrived. He glanced at the clock. 10:47 p.m., almost time to begin. Luna whined again as he put on his jacket. "Stay here," he murmured. "I'll be back before sunrise." But as he closed the door, he could feel her gaze on him, the kind of gaze animals reserve for moments they don't understand, yet somehow fear. By the time he reached the lobby, Grange was waiting, just as before, coat on, gloves buttoned. "The guests have retired?" Ethan asked. "They have," said Grange, "and they will not disturb you." There was a faint emphasis on they. "You'll find tonight easier. The first night is always the worst." "Because of the visitor?" Ethan asked, half expecting the man to deny it. But Grange only regarded him with that same unreadable calm. "Because of what you bring with you." Then, after a pause, "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." And he was gone, swallowed by the fog beyond the door. Midnight. The clock struck, each chime lingering too long, as if the sound were reluctant to fade. Ethan logged the time in the guest ledger, then sat back, hands folded. The lobby light flickered once, humming softly in the silence. He tried to read, but the words wouldn't stay still. The book, a battered copy of Frankenstein, seemed suddenly cruelly ironic. After a few pages, he gave up and set it aside. At 12:45 he heard it again. The thump from below. This time slower. 3 beats, a pause, 3 more. Like a heartbeat. He stood, heart hammering, eyes on the basement door. It didn't move. The padlock gleamed faintly, but the sound continued, faint, rhythmic, impossibly steady. He took a step closer. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. At 1:12 a.m. the wind rose. The inn creaked under its weight. Somewhere upstairs a door slammed. Ethan jolted, then remembered. Rule 6, never leave the desk between 1 and 4. He stayed where he was, eyes fixed on the staircase. The light from the lobby reached only halfway up before fading into darkness. He thought he saw movement there, a faint shimmer, as if something had passed through the air, displacing it. He forced himself to breathe evenly. The clock ticked. The seconds dragged. When the phone rang, he almost laughed, a desperate, broken laugh, because of course it would. He looked at the clock. 1:59 a.m. The sound was harsh in the quiet, slicing through it like a blade. 1 ring. 2. 3. Each one louder than the last. He clenched his fists, whispering to himself, "Don't answer it, don't." The 7th ring, the 8th. The sound burrowed into his skull. Then silence. He exhaled, shaking, muscles trembling with the tension of stillness. And then the phone clicked. Not a ring this time, but the soft click of a line being opened. Someone was already there. Ethan's mouth went dry. He could hear it, faint breathing. Slow, deliberate. Then a voice. Low, rasping, yet strangely familiar. "Ethan Caldwell." He froze. "You left it running," the voice whispered. "You left us running." He stared at the phone. It sat motionless, the receiver still on its cradle. The voice continued, threading through the air. "Room 13 is open." Then click. The sound cut out. The clock ticked. Somewhere Luna howled. He didn't remember standing. He didn't remember walking to the key rack. But suddenly he was there, staring at it. The key for room 13 was gone. He turned toward the corridor leading to the guest rooms. The air felt heavier there, thicker, as if every step drew him deeper underwater. "Grange," he called, though he knew the man wasn't there. No answer. He began to walk. The old floor groaned under his weight. Each lamp along the corridor flickered as he passed, the light pulsing like breath. At the far end stood a door, plain, unmarked, not numbered like the others. He could feel something on the other side. Not movement exactly, more like awareness. He reached out, fingers trembling, and the brass handle turned by itself. Ethan stumbled back. The door creaked open a fraction. The darkness inside was absolute. He shut it quickly, heart pounding, and fled back toward the lobby. The air seemed colder there now, carrying a faint scent, not decay, but ozone, as if after a storm. The phone was silent, the basement door still shut. But the key rack, the hook for room 13, was empty still. The rest of the night passed in a blur. He must have dozed off at some point, because when he opened his eyes again, gray light filtered through the windows and the clock read 6:07 a.m. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream. Then he looked at the logbook. There, written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting under the last entry. 2:14 a.m. Guest checked into room 13. No name. Just that. Grange said little when Ethan confronted him again at breakfast. He merely read the log, expression calm. "I didn't write this," Ethan said. Something did." Grange nodded once as though unsurprised. "The house records what it remembers. You'll learn that. I heard a voice on the phone. It knew my name. They always do." Ethan's patience cracked. What the hell is this place? For the first time, something like emotion flickered across Grange's face, not fear but pity. "A mirror, Mr. Caldwell. Every man who comes here brings his reflection. Most cannot bear to look." Before Ethan could reply, the man stood. "You should rest. The next night will test you more deeply." "Why do you keep saying that? What's coming?" Grange didn't answer. He walked to the door, pausing only once. "And if you value your sanity, Mr. Caldwell," he looked back, eyes cold as glass, "do not look into mirrors after 3. That night Ethan sat at the desk again. The rules lay before him. But there was something different now, a faint addition, written in new ink beneath the list. 7. Do not look into mirrors after 3:00 a.m. He stared at it for a long time. The letters looked freshly typed, blacker than the rest, edges crisp. He felt something shift inside him then, a subtle, sinking realization. The rules were changing, responding, as if the inn itself were watching. Outside, the wind carried the first breath of another storm. Somewhere upstairs, a door opened and closed on its own. Ethan reached down, fingers brushing Luna's collar. The dog was trembling, her eyes fixed on the mirror behind the reception desk, a tall, antique piece with a gilt frame, its surface dark in the low light. For a moment he thought he saw movement there, not his reflection, but something behind it. He turned away. The storm deepened. And as the clock struck 2, the phone began to ring again. The second night began with rain. It wasn't the gentle drizzle of the English countryside Ethan had grown used to. It was heavier, relentless, like something was trying to wash the land clean or drown it. The road leading to Blackthorn Inn had turned to a slick ribbon of mud, and by the time he stepped through the door, his shoes were soaked, leaving faint prints on the checkered floor. Victor Grange was already there, standing behind the counter, still as a photograph. Ethan froze. "You're still here." The old man's lips twitched, something between a smile and a warning. "Some places," Victor said, "don't like being left alone." He slid a folded piece of paper across the desk. Ethan hesitated before picking it up. Rule 10. After 3:00 a.m., Avoid all reflective surfaces. If you see your reflection move before you do, turn off the lights and wait until sunrise. Ethan frowned. You're joking. Victor met his gaze, his eyes dull and wet under the dim lamplight. No one jokes here, Mr. Caldwell, least of all the mirrors. Something in the old man's voice made the air feel heavier. Ethan tucked the paper into his pocket and muttered, "Fine, I'll play along." Victor's mouth curled slightly. "You already are." Then the old man turned and walked toward the narrow stairwell that led to the private quarters upstairs. His footsteps echoed for a long while after he was gone, as though the building itself was repeating them. The night dragged on. Ethan busied himself with small tasks to avoid thinking about the mirrors, polishing the brass counterbell, wiping the dust from the guest book, feeding the fire. Midnight came and went. The grandfather clock ticked like a heartbeat, deep and rhythmic. At 2:47 a.m. the phone rang. He stared at it. The old rotary phone sat on the desk like an artifact, its cord stretched and frayed. The ringing continued, slow, deliberate. He reached for it. Blackthorn Inn night desk. A silence, then a faint voice whispering through static. "Ethan." He froze. "Who is this?" "You left me there." The whisper grew sharper, threaded with anger or pain. It was impossible to tell. His pulse quickened. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "What do you want?" "Room 13. Click. The line went dead. The hum of the storm returned, louder now, thrumming against the windows. Ethan's breath fogged the glass as he looked toward the hallway that led to the guest rooms. The lights there were dimmer than he remembered. The number plaques on the doors looked darker, as though something had soaked through the wood. At the far end, a door was ajar. Not open, just enough to see a sliver of black. He stepped closer. And then he saw her. A woman in a red coat stood at the end of the hall, motionless, the same color as blood under candlelight. Her hair was wet, strands clinging to her cheeks, her face pale, expressionless, except for her eyes. They glowed faintly, reflecting the low amber light. "Ma'am," Ethan called, forcing his voice steady, "you're not supposed to be here after check-in hours." She tilted her head slowly, like a puppet whose strings had been tugged too hard. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but carried across the hallway as though whispered directly into his ear. "You shouldn't have opened the file, Ethan." He blinked. "What file?" But she was gone. The hallway was empty again, only the faint echo of rain. When he finally returned to the lobby, his own reflection in the glass door was trembling, but he wasn't moving. At 3:04 a.m., Ethan broke the rule. He didn't mean to. He was just trying to breathe. The inn had grown too quiet. Even the rain seemed to have stopped, leaving only the sound of the clock ticking and the faint hum of electricity through the old walls. He stood before the small mirror hanging beside the desk, a habit from his old life, checking his tie, his face, his exhaustion. At first it was fine. Then his reflection blinked. He hadn't. He stepped back sharply. His reflection smiled. The corners of its mouth stretched too far, like a crack forming in glass. The smile widened until it wasn't a smile anymore. It was a scream held inside. And from behind the reflection, in the darkness of the mirror, something moved. The woman in red. Her hand reached out, not toward him but toward his reflection. And the reflection grabbed it. Ethan stumbled backward, the chair behind him clattering to the floor. He turned off the lights, plunging the lobby into darkness. His breathing was ragged, his pulse thundered in his ears. From the mirror came a faint, wet whisper. "We're not done, Ethan." He stayed there, crouched behind the counter, waiting for the dawn. Every few minutes, he heard something brush against the mirror's surface, soft, deliberate, as though someone was trying to find a way through. When morning finally came, The light spilling through the window revealed the mirror again. It was cracked, spiderweb lines running from the center outward. And faintly behind his reflection, there was still another face. The morning after the mirror incident was gray, heavy and wrong. No birds sang outside Blackthorn Inn. The air itself seemed to hang motionless, like the world was holding its breath. Ethan hadn't slept. He sat in the lobby with a mug of black coffee gone cold, staring at the cracks in the mirror. They looked deeper now, thicker, as if the glass had veins. He wanted to tell someone, Victor perhaps, but the old man had vanished. His coat still hung on the rack. His pipe sat in the ashtray beside the ledger, but there was no trace of him in the rooms upstairs or anywhere else on the property. Ethan found a note on the desk instead, written in the same sharp, angular handwriting as the rules. Mr. Caldwell, do not attempt to leave tonight. The storm will return. Whatever you hear from room 13, do not respond. The door remembers those who knock. AVG. He read the message 3 times. The edges of the paper were damp, as though it had been left in the rain before being delivered. He turned it over, half expecting more rules. There was nothing except a faint red fingerprint near the corner. That afternoon he took Luna, the one bit of warmth he had left, out for a walk behind the inn. The woods there were silent, no wind, no birds, only the faint sound of water dripping from unseen branches. At one point Luna froze, ears up, growling low in her throat. Ethan followed her gaze. Between 2 trees, something glimmered, a reflection where no light should be. It was a window, tall, rectangular, half buried under a collapsed mound of earth. The remains of another building, perhaps. Through the cracked pane, Ethan saw movement. A face, pale and slack, staring out at him. He blinked, it was gone. He yanked Luna's leash and hurried back to the inn. That night would be his last shift, one way or another. The 3rd night began with silence. No rain, no wind, no phone calls, just stillness. Ethan walked through the corridor with a flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the stale air. The floorboards seemed softer now, almost damp underfoot. The numbered doors loomed in the darkness, each slightly ajar, as if something had moved through them during the day. Room 13 waited at the end. There was no plaque on the door anymore, only a faint rectangular shadow where it had been torn off. He told himself he wouldn't open it. He told himself he was smarter than that. But then came the noise. A faint rhythmic tapping, like knuckles against wood. Tab, tab, tab. He froze. The sound continued, measured, patient. Then came a voice. Ethan, please, I can't breathe. His throat tightened. It was her again, the woman in red. He pressed his forehead against the cold wood. Who are you? You know me, she whispered. You made me. His breath fogged the air. Without realizing, his hand found the doorknob. It was warm. And when he turned it, something exhaled. The door swung open. The corridor behind it was wrong. It wasn't part of the inn. It was metallic, lined with rusted panels and humming cables, illuminated by pulses of red light. The air smelled of ozone and burnt plastic. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Down the corridor, a faint humming grew louder. A low mechanical thrum, almost like breathing. At the end stood a room. A single, circular chamber filled with wires and flickering screens. And at its center, a machine. It was a cage of light and metal, alive with motion. Inside it sat a figure strapped to a chair, head covered by a helmet of glass and wires. When Ethan stepped closer, his stomach turned to ice. It was him. The same face, the same clothes, the same trembling hands. Eyes wide open, staring straight ahead as the machine pulsed red. The other Ethan opened his mouth. No sound came out. Then, through the speakers above, came a distorted voice. Welcome back, Subject E03. Phase 4, Memory Restoration. The world tilted. The air seemed to vibrate. Ethan stumbled back, clutching his head. He remembered fragments, an office, men in suits, a contract he never read. A voice saying, "You'll help us reshape perception." A woman screaming his name from behind glass. He looked at the machine again. The other Ethan's body began to convulse. The glass helmet filled with light, then went dark. On one of the screens, text flickered. Thought loop deity. Subject re-entering simulation. He ran. Back through the corridor. Back through the door that no longer looked like a door. The inn's hallway stretched endlessly now, folding in on itself like a maze. He could hear footsteps behind him, slow, dragging. He didn't look back. Luna barked once, distant and muffled, as if from behind a wall. Then the phone rang. He stopped. The old rotary phone sat in the middle of the hallway table, where it had never been before. It rang again. He picked it up. "Who is this?" he gasped. A pause, then Victor's voice, flat, calm, distorted by static. "You were never hired, Ethan." "What?" "You were never fired either. You volunteered." Lightning flashed outside, flooding the corridor in blood-red light. In that light he saw her again, the woman in red, standing behind the cracked mirror. "We needed your guilt," she whispered. "It makes the loop stable." Ethan dropped the phone. The lights flickered. The sound of machinery roared beneath the floorboards, as if the whole inn was alive, waking up. Then came another sound, the deep, grinding whine of something powering down. The world trembled, the walls bled light. He felt his body lift, weightless, as if pulled through water. A voice, familiar, human, echoed in his skull. "Thigh ngh I letter 1 ec7 m chua k letter 1 ebft thuck, Ethan. Chi letter 1 e9c s letter 1 ebd ki v letter 1 ec1." The words sliced through his mind. He tried to scream. Then blackness. Epilogue: The inn remains. When the storm cleared, the Blackthorn Inn stood empty once again. Dust on every surface, cobwebs in the corners, the guest book open to the last written entry. Night 3, subject stable. Reintegration successful. The mirror behind the counter was whole again. In its surface, faintly, a man stood, staring, unmoving. He looked like Ethan Caldwell. But his eyes were open too wide. And when a visitor passed through the door, the reflection didn't follow. Ethan woke to the hum of fluorescent light. It buzzed above him, steady, cold. The air smelled sterile, chemical, like disinfectant and metal. He was lying on a narrow bed, white sheets, padded walls. A steady beeping came from his right heart monitor. The rhythm was too slow, too even to be real. He sat up, head pounding, vision swimming. His throat was dry. There was a mirror on the opposite wall. Of course there was. He forced himself to stand, bare feet touching the cold floor. The world felt thin. When he moved, there was a half-second lag, like his body was catching up to the decision. He touched the mirror. It was warm. Then faintly, from the other side, his reflection smiled. "You came back," it whispered. Ethan staggered backward, his spine hitting the wall. The heart monitor blared. He turned toward the door. It had no handle, only a small black panel blinking red. A voice crackled overhead. Monotone, familiar. Subject E03, reawakening successful. Memory integration incomplete. Proceed to calibration. "Who's there?" Ethan shouted. "Where am I?" Static filled the room, then another voice, softer, female. He knew that voice. "Ethan, please, don't fight it this time." The woman in red. Her tone wasn't cruel now. It was weary, almost pleading. "You weren't supposed to remember, not again." He pressed his hands to his ears. "You're not real." "Neither are you." The lights flickered, the mirror rippled like water. For a moment he saw the lobby of Blackthorn Inn reflected there, dust, lamp glow, the faint outline of the front desk. And standing behind it, Victor Grange. Watching. Then the room went dark. When the light returned, he was no longer in the cell. He stood in a massive, circular chamber, the same one he'd seen beneath the inn. Rows of pods lined the walls, each holding a figure bathed in red light. Men, women, children, all with wires sunk into their skulls, their faces locked in silent screams. The floor hummed beneath his feet. A single terminal flickered before him, displaying lines of code. Blackthorn Simulation System V72. Active subjects 184. Last memory sync 0300 AM. He stepped closer, his hands trembled as he typed. Who am I? The cursor blinked, then text appeared. Ethan Caldwell, Cognitive Architect. Status, Test Subject Loop Instance 47. His vision blurred, no. He remembered now meetings in glass rooms, corporate promises, words like cognitive mapping, dream structure, self-replicating consciousness. He had helped build it, the Blackthorn program. A simulation designed to harvest memory patterns through artificial guilt loops. They tested it on volunteers, then on employees, then on him. He staggered back from the terminal, bile rising in his throat. He looked around at the pods again, at their faces. One of them twitched, then another. Their eyes opened in unison, glowing red through the glass. And in every reflection, his own face stared back. He ran, through corridors of glass and light, past doors marked with numbers that made no sense. The walls pulsed as he moved, shifting between metal and wood, technology and wallpaper. The Blackthorn Inn bleeding into the laboratory that birthed it. Somewhere Luna barked, a sound so sharp, so alive that it cut through the madness. He followed it. At the end of the hall he found a small door, the kind from the inn, wooden, painted white, brass knob faintly tarnished. He reached for it. The voice of Victor Grange stopped him. Mr. Caldwell. Ethan froze. Victor stepped out of the shadows, immaculate as ever, holding his ledger. His eyes were no longer human, blank, flickering with red static. You can leave, Victor said softly, but you won't exist out there. You'll dissolve, memory without anchor. He turned a page in his ledger. Or, he continued, you can stay, accept the cycle, sleep again, dream of the inn. We'll keep you safe here where the rules are simple. Ethan's hand tightened around the doorknob. Safe? You call that place safe? Victor tilted his head. You made it. The words hit like a blade. The machine, the mirror, the woman in red, his guilt had birthed them all. Every horror had been a reflection of his own design. The woman's voice returned, echoing through the halls. Please, Ethan, don't let it break again. He looked down. The floor beneath him flickered between tile and dirt, light and darkness. Through the thin membrane of reality, he saw the inn waiting, its lamplit lobby, the rain against the window, the empty chair behind the counter. He could go back. Or he could step forward, into the unknown beyond the machine. The air trembled. The walls began to crumble, dissolving into static. Ethan closed his eyes. No more loops, he whispered. And he opened the door. Morning. A gentle drizzle fell over the Yorkshire countryside. A car wound its way along the old road that led to Forgotten Inn. Inside the car, a young woman scrolled through her phone. A job listing flickered on the screen. Night receptionist, Blackthorn Inn. 60/HR, minimal duties, accommodation provided. Please note, all applicants must agree to the house rules. She smiled faintly. Weird pay rate, she murmured and tapped apply. Behind her, for just a moment, the faint reflection in the window smiled back. too wide.